Then that brings us to our first semester school culture activity data report. And who will be handling this?
This is Assistant Principal Mannon from Student Affairs and Dean of Students Neil DeGetti.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Evening, Board.
Okay, starting on approximately page 62.
Today we're going to give you a summary of the attendance and suspension report from first semester. To start, the overall attendance rate for first semester ended up at 94.65%, which is down a little bit from last year, which was 94.88%. Breaking down each month, August, September, and October, our attendance had similar attendance rates as last year. Going into November, we suffered through something that happens every 100 years or so with the Cubs winning the World Series, and that significantly impacted our attendance rate as we had over 628 excused absences on November 4th for the rally downtown, with an additional 115 unexcused absences, bringing our overall attendance rate down for that day to 55% or so. So the building was pretty empty that day. Overall ADA, or average daily attendance numbers for November, was 92.2% in November, down from 93.9% at this time last year. Extended vacations during Thanksgiving kind of coupled with the Cubs rally, and thus we were down to 92.2 in November.
What was special about this year's Thanksgiving? You wrote it in here too. We always have a 4-day weekend on Thanksgiving. Why would there have been a different impact on attendance this year versus any other year that you're comparing to?
I think it's similar results as last year.
Well, that's my point.
Right.
Were you saying because of Thanksgiving our attendance was down? But I challenge whether Thanksgiving affected versus last year. It's the same situation every year. Does that
Correct.
really explain the difference?
Our attendance rate for the week before Thanksgiving was 90%. So
What
that's
was it
significantly
last year?
90%. This year was 91%. So when
So
we
we
run,
actually were better this year.
But when we run typically 95, close to 96%.
But my point is, you were
It wasn't
explaining
achieved.
why November was different, and actually Thanksgiving we did better this year. So that means there were other reasons of why we did worse
In November.
in November. And the Cubs numbers you just gave don't really address the significant difference in it. Because
So
we would have
this-
had the whole school absent for 2 days.
So
to do
what we
that.
found this year is that we do have an increase in students being hospitalized.
Okay.
And so that has had an impact. And then in November, our suspensions had a little bit, I mean, they were down comparably from last year. But that does have an impact too, when you have suspensions. But we have had an increase in students being hospitalized compared to last year, November, which I was trying to get that number, but I couldn't get it for you.
Well, and again, I don't expect you to know every one, but it's a little difficult when we're reading it and you say, well, because of Thanksgiving,
Sure.
it was down. Well,
Yeah.
what was different this year than that?
It was the
I see what you're saying.
hospitalizations were.
But the biggest thing was one
The
day of
Cubs.
600 kids calling in, or parents calling kids in.
It does make
It
Yeah,
brought
one
us
day
from
will hit.
93% at this time last year to down to 92.
Okay.
So-
That's a big hit. It's the
It
same
is.
thing if we had,
The polar vortex.
like
We had
the
that
one day we opened up and we had
Yep.
half the school call off, it hurt us by 2 percentage
Yep.
points, right?
And affected the rest of the year.
Right. So
Okay.
I think Tim's point was just that Thanksgiving has kind of always been,
An issue.
November's always been a rough month. So it wasn't a direct impact, that's all right.
I understand. Moving into the average excused absences, we were up in August, November, December, and semester excused absences were up from 54.2 to 57.1. And again, you have the Cubs rally that affected that as well, but those are calls into our office for personal sick, death in the family, things like that.
It
Those
was
are
cold in December too, right? But you had low attendance in
Correct.
that week. Okay.
So those were excused absences. We also looked at our class cuts, and those were down each month from 3.4 to 1.1. per period per day. So that's a victory for first semester, big victory for first semester for this year. In the other category, as Mr. Dugatti alluded to here, we do suffer through some social and emotional type cases that lead to hospitalizations for our students, and we typically see those numbers. They have been on the rise lately, but our other category, which is college visits, hospitalizations, that category actually went down from 8.8 to 6.23, so that actually was a victory too. The last category here, we're looking at tardies. Tardies were down significantly from 13.6 to 6.5 average per period per day. We took into consideration the multiple construction projects that are happening in the community in Brookfield and Riverside, especially the one here in Brookfield tied our bridge up, which led to many students late to first period for about a 6-week stretch. And so taking that into consideration, we were lenient on our first period tardies during that time due to the traffic backups. Now that construction project is complete moving forward, we're now enforcing those tardies first period. But that's why our tardy numbers were down significantly. But we also want to point out too that the HERO program and what we have up and running also eliminates the amount of students that are in our hallways. Our kids are getting to class sooner now that they know that once the door is closed that they have to go get a HERO pass, and that accumulates for consequences. So that's been a victory for us throughout the last year and going into this year as well. Just questions on this report. We addressed Thanksgiving here a little bit in that week. Want to talk, I think that was the only question there. We do want to point out that looking at overall attendance for the Cubs rally, we do take into consideration 3 different categories: unexcused absences, excused absences, and then we have cuts too that we take into consideration for our overall attendance rate. So hopefully that addressed that question.
What's the difference between a cut and an unexcused absence?
So an unexcused absence is call, and then after we follow up with that, it turns into a cut,
Oh,
which then is enforced by the dean's office here.
okay.
Some exciting things about our attendance that we wanted to point out this year: the athletic office ran a competition for their fall sports, and the winner, they basically threw it out there. They wanted to see the highest percentage of attendance per sport for the fall season at boys golf, held a pretty high percentage of 97.9 for the fall season, and they were the winner, and they won a pizza party. So that was a successful program that will run again here in the spring as well. We did a quarterly attendance challenge where we broke it down per grade level, and the freshman and sophomore classes were pretty close, with the freshman class winning at 96.9 for their first quarter attendance. So we provided them with a ice cream party during lunch and cafeteria time. I think this was huge in helping our cuts and our overall attendance rate. We revised the senior exemption, final exam exemptions criteria. We updated that to include any cuts that students would not be excluded. And due to that, we saw the decrease in our overall cuts first semester. In the dean's office, we completed 20 home visits first semester for students that are chronically truant or not coming to school, and we wrote Riverside Police Department wrote over 23 truancy tickets for chronic truants as well.
So what does a home visit look like?
Want to handle that?
Sure. So, it could be anything from, sometimes I'll have a parent that'll call and say, student A won't get out of bed, and so we're like, sure, we'll come on over, we'll bring another person with myself. Usually the parent will be home, let us in, say, hey, come on down, get yourself dressed, and then sometimes parent, there's been a couple times where I've actually walked with the student while the person in the car has kind of followed behind us to get them to school. Sometimes it'll be where we'll call the parent and they'll say, hey, we need to come and just make sure that so-and-so is home. We have an issue now where we have a student who's missed 20 some odd days, and they're saying, oh, we got a doctor's note, and I'm like, well, it's time for us to come to the house and see whether or not, are you really that sick? Typically, when they find out that we're gonna come to the home, in about an hour, the kid's usually dropped off at the front of the school. So what it simply looks like is basically us knocking on the door, saying who we are, why we're here, and want to know why you're not coming to school. Sometimes we have to do it regularly to help some parents who are having some troubles getting their kids out of bed, but sometimes just once every 4 years. But it's interesting.
Thanks, Neil.
Thank you.
Okay, moving into the suspension data, if you don't have any questions about attendance.
Could you just explain why the truancy went up and what's the impact to the students if they get a truancy ticket?
So what we typically do is, I don't know, I think the ability to have the police ultimately come and write the ticket as quickly as possible, so that way, even if they're freshmen or sophomores or juniors or seniors, I think the sooner we can get them in the building to write a ticket, if they're becoming chronically truant, is very important. We found the past few years is if we kind of wait and say, all right, if you need to start coming to school, we're gonna do this, you need to start coming to school, we're gonna do this. If we sort of delay that, and also we're sitting here on the juniors or seniors in high school and we've yet to write a truancy ticket. So our goal was this year is right away, just, we're gonna hit you with a truancy ticket. We've given you if you have a cut, we give you the Saturday. If you're not improving, then we're gonna write you a truancy ticket, not to just say, hey, we're gonna, we want you to get a ticket and stand in front of a judge at Maybrook, but to show you that we need you here. We want you to graduate. That's kind of the whole purpose of it.
I understand. So what's the ramification?
So what we do then is we go to court and we stand in front of a judge and they have to explain to the judge why they're not going to school. Typically, depending on the judge in Cook County, they can give you 5 hours community service. They might extend it to the next court date to kind of see whether or not they're coming to school, and then we go from there.
Who gets the ticket, the parent or the student?
The student gets the ticket, and then the parent has to go to the court with them, which, once again, you're kind of putting it on the parent, which is kind of what it wants. We don't want to just stick it on the parent, but it's kind of showing, here, we need you there too.
Accountability.
It's important to point out too that that's not our first go-to. We meet weekly, and we review our attendance data, and then we put in interventions in place. If after our interventions are exhausted and we're seeing no progress from our students, then we go ahead and have a truancy ticket written. But that's not the end all be all, because Mr. Dugatti and Mr. Sibley are attending at the court session, and so then it's another time for us to link up the family, and that it joins us together with them, and so we kind of see that process through. So it has been beneficial. Okay, looking at our suspension overall data, our overall suspension data was significantly down from last year. Our total offenses was 26, total students was 26, compared to that of 65 offenses and 54 students last year.
That's really amazing.
It's remarkable, and it's contributed to the work of the dean's office and the interventions that they're providing. So overall behavior in the building was really good for a semester. We do want to point out, just every year, it seems like we have high rates of suspensions when we get close to holidays or breaks, and that occurred this year. We saw over 8 inappropriate or non-compliant suspensions. At that time, I think tempers are kind of high and stress levels are up there for students with anxiety of tests and change of schedule and things like that. So we see more referrals come down and more non-compliant behaviors, but we do see a little bit of a higher rate in those in November and December heading into the break.
The board approved late last year, early last summer, the release period of the assistant dean, Ms. Sullivan.
Mm-hmm.
Has that been a help in these numbers and in your attendance
Absolutely.
initiatives?
Well, what's nice to have when Ms. Sullivan is that, obviously we have 4th hours, our longest period of the day, where now we'll have 3 basically deans be able to process students with referrals. A lot of times what's nice here is that if we find out that there might be an issue between 2 students, or a student's having a bad day early in the morning, and now we're in the cafeteria, you might not be able to get to it, but now since there's 3 of us, one of us can now peel off from being in the caf, or if we're in a meeting, one of us can peel off and then grab those students and kind of de-escalate
Meet
any
with those
situation.
students.
Meet with those
Meet with
students.
those students, that's
Sorry.
correct.
Sorry.
Meet with them.
Meet with those students and de-escalate any situation.
One thing we did do from last year, we looked at our suspension fight numbers, and this will lead into my next point here, but half of our fights stemmed from transfer students that did not attend our feeder programs. And so just looking at that data, utilizing Ms. Sullivan in her release period, we met with them 3 times for a semester, and it was just, we'll provide them lunch, but it's more to here is, let's tell you a little bit about RB. Here are some resources that you guys can go to if you have issues or whatnot, and we want them to get engaged. So we went and overviewed our activities and what we have to offer for those students. So I think that was beneficial too, and that's because she had more time, Ms. Sullivan had more time to meet with those students with myself. So that was a big win. And looking at our fight numbers, last year we had a significant amount of 22 offenses compared to this year we had 5, which is, that's a big, big victory for us, so.
Good job, Dave.
Great
Good job,
Good job
Neil.
with your staff.
Could you tell me what the technology offenses, what are, it's not people hacking into our
No.
With the
database or
Chromebooks,
something?
our students sign a user agreement form, and so that means, they're not gonna be on any inappropriate websites or use any inappropriate language on those computers, and we found a student that printed out an inappropriate, topic on, one of our computer labs that led to suspensions.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Great job.
Good job, guys.
Keep up the good work.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.